Hey guys, how's it going? Matt from Foul Ball Productions here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you're doing well because I'm doing phenomenally. Thank you so very much. This is the 15th episode of the MFer podcast. I had to think about that. I'm not good with sequences. But thank you so much for being here. And additionally, I've got a very special show for you. I have a very special guest. The lovely Chrissie Mayr is here with me. Thank you so much, Chrissie, for being here.
Thank you for having me in your spaceship with you.
Yes, thank you. Well, this is my personal pod that I have. I orbit the planet now instead of staying here because it's so crazy I can't handle it. So I had to go. I had to go into space.
And the rent is too damn high.
Way too damn high. I do have free internet. I worked out a thing with Elon. He gives me the Earthlink thing, so free Wi-Fi up here, which is pretty tight.
Okay, good. Good for you. Yeah, I didn't think
sure.
The signal would be good up there.
No, crystal clear. Yeah, 5 bars all the time.
Nice.
Yeah. So how are you? What's been going on with you?
I am good. I was just this past weekend doing a weekend of shows in Springfield, New Jersey, Scotty's Comedy Cove. The Wednesday before that, I was in Philly doing the Helium Comedy Club out there. And then the week before that, I was in Austin doing the Cap City Comedy Club, where the show that you went to. That was a really fun hang. All of us going out afterwards. That was really cool. Because it doesn't get to happen too much. Like sometimes it's like it was a good combination of like friends and fans. We're like, yeah, this is all like let's just go out and drink. And I was learning a lot about 6th Street, how it's like gotten 6th Street in Austin like gotten a bit more dangerous.
Yeah.
Over the year.
Yeah, it's wild down there. Like it's a vibe, and the comedy scene is really cool. I mean, I was briefly hooking up with this comic girl for a little while, and she took me to like all these different mics. So like we started off like around the corner at this place. What was it? I can't remember what it was called. Speakeasy, I think it was called Speakeasy. And then we went on to Shakespeare's, and then the Creek and the Cave has their own mic, and like the whole comedy scene is pretty rich. And I saw, Amy Shankar.
Oh yeah, I've heard of her.
Yeah, like she was just around, just hanging, and I was like, wow, this is a pretty vibrant scene. And I guess they had just done Kill Tony. The Ryan Long and Ron White were on, and Hans Kim was hanging out. And I was like, wow, this is like a scene. It's really got a lot going on. It's a cool, healthy vibe. Yeah,
that's good.
I was into it. Yeah, it's
take that, LA.
Yeah. Did you ever spend any time in LA?
I went once last March, or no, 2 Marches ago at the beginning of the pandemic. Like it was just a couple days before that all started. It was when my trip was ending, and I was so happy I was able to like do the shows. I got up at the Comedy Store for the first time, and I was oh, all right, I can see why people go here. And then everything was getting weird. I was in a grocery store in West Hollywood near where my hotel was. I was staying like basically right next to the Comedy Store, and like everyone was just like chaos in this grocery store. People were buying like a lot of the wipes were gone. And I was like, I guess for some reason I need to buy rubbing alcohol and put it into small bottles and bring it with me on the plane. Like I just thought that was the move. Like I need to have rubbing alcohol on me. Oh, because I thought I would have to make my own sanitizing fluid.
It's like survival. It's like a post-apocalyptic disaster already.
It wasn't really like a panic buy. It was just like a dumb, like, I guess I have to buy cleaning fluids type buy. It was weird.
LA was very bizarre. That's where I spent the duration of the pandemic, and that was not awesome at all. They took it really seriously. Lockdowns were super hard. I mean, it was just like months of not really seeing anyone except for a few of the dudes that I worked with. I was working in a bakery, and so I'd see saw those guys, and then whoever I would run into at like the grocery store. But even like my circle was hesitant to hang, and I didn't.
Wow.
I was just like isolated. That's why I started YouTubing, quite frankly, because I didn't really have much else to do.
Yeah, same. Like we got through it. God, so many of our friends got weird. We just played a lot of Pokemon Go, and we would like walk to the Dunkin' Donuts and like walk back. It was like awesome. Like we have some very good like pandemic memories. Of course, Tiger King. Of course, yeah, just a lot of Pokemon Go. I think it's a little bit. The more I talk about it, the more slightly embarrassed I am. But
I mean, whatever. We no one knew what we were doing. Like, I mean, I played in the beginning. I played so many video games, like to completion. Like, just it was all I was
Wow.
doing. Yeah, and I got to like the sixth or seventh, and I'm like, I can't just keep doing this. This can't be what I do. Just video games and hard drinking all the time.
It's like
I'm
a
not gonna make it out.
It's like the kid in you. It's like this binge of like, oh, I have all the time to do whatever I want. I don't have to go
Yeah.
back to school or work or anything. Like, what have you always wanted to do? And it was just kind of gluttonous. Like the
Yeah.
early days of the pandemic were very like luxurious in our gluttony.
And then like, I had all this money, you know what I mean? Like I just got thousands of dollars and like no bills. I was just buying like expensive
Really?
tequila.
Oh, so you
Yeah.
got like I never got that. I never got any of the stimulus money because I hadn't I'm like behind on my taxes. So I wonder if I'll get that retroactively when I submit them.
Be pretty sick. I mean, had just started working at a bar job, and like we did all this training. We were just ready to open, and the pandemic hit, and then I was just like, oh, I guess I'll apply for unemployment, and then just got like this giant check and had no
Wow.
responsibilities. Yeah, it was actually kind of sick in that regard. But other than that, I mean, like the lack of social interaction and the lack of carnal relations that I was experiencing all were taking their toll on me after a
Carnal
while.
relations. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that must have been tough. So you were a single person during the pandemic. How long did it take you before you were like, fuck it, I'm just gonna fuck someone and maybe get COVID?
Oh no, I mean I didn't. Like there was a girl that I was hooking up with right before the pandemic, and we made, I mean, literally four separate attempts to meet up, and every single time she got cold feet at the last minute, and I was just like, oh my God. I was like, is she fucking with me? Is this like some kind of
Wow. I can't believe you
test?
gave her 4 tries. That's
Well, I
really
was
generous.
desperate. I was
Okay.
desperate. There wasn't anything else going on, and it was like everyone was so paranoid. I didn't even try Tinder, so it took me until Vegas, actually, like the first meetup, the first like Gary meetup in Vegas that like December to hook up with someone. So yeah,
Oh wow.
it's a long dry spell. It wasn't all that great. Yeah. But yeah,
Oh,
it
it's
was.
hard out here.
Yeah, it is hard out here. I had a few questions for you. Oh, one thing I just wanted to commend you. I just thought was really great was when you had Mark Norman on your podcast a few weeks ago.
Ah, thank you.
You're welcome.
That felt like a real get. I've known him and like respected him as a comic for many years. Like when I started, he was already like established, so he's always been someone I've looked up to in terms of like work ethic and just sheer amount of like jokes that he can churn out.
Yeah, he's a machine.
Yeah, he really is. Almost like I wonder if he's autistic, you
Yeah,
know,
probably a little
because
bit.
the degree to which he can churn out jokes.
Yeah, he's really good, and I love what this shows that he does with Rogan and Ari and Shane Gillis, the Protect Our Parks podcasts.
Hmm.
Those are super fun. But what I wanted to specifically commend you on was the analysis of the two bits that were super similar. I thought that was really revealing and interesting, and I don't think Mark was expecting that you were going to talk about that. What did
Well,
he?
he did because I actually messaged him first
Oh, okay.
on Instagram because people were sending me. He had done this special on Netflix, and so he was posting like what good comics do, like what I'm not doing with my social media. He was putting clips from his Netflix special on his Instagram with like the words at the bottom, like the quick clips.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple people had sent those to me like, Chrissy, this is your bit. And I'm like watching it, I'm like, oh fuck, like yeah, it's the exact same premise. A lot of the lines, a lot of the tags were exactly the same, and I was like, damn. And like, and it was very much about the life I was living. Like it's about a kind of a slutty person's life. And I was like, but I'm like, Mark has also lived a slutty person's life as well. But I'm like, I had worked with this dude before the pandemic, like a couple years ago. I had opened him a whole weekend at the Harvard Funny Bone, and we had spoken about this bit in the car on the way back. I remember because I was talking about it with Frank. I'm like, didn't we worked together, right? He's like, yeah, I drove him and his girlfriend May back into the city afterwards, and we talked about comedy. And he gave me a tag. He gave me the tag of like
Oh
your
no.
dad got in or something
Yeah.
like that, and I was like, holy shit. So I messaged him. I'm like, dude, that's my joke. Like what's going on? Like, and it was funny because I had spoken with him probably a couple months prior because there was another guy that kind of came out of the woodwork was like, oh, Mark Norman stole my joke. And I think I had him on maybe one of my morning shows to quickly talk about it, and just kind of heard the guy out. I tried to not like really take one side or the other. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty similar. But I'm like, oh, but maybe it could be same brain. Who knows? And then Mark had messaged me because he had seen that episode. He's like, was like, hey, kind of thanks for being cool. Like, I didn't steal that guy's bit. It's, these open micers, almost like this sense of like people are trying to clout chase him, which I can
Mm-hmm.
understand. He's
Sure.
huge.
Yeah.
And so then this happened with one of my jokes a couple of months later. And he was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no, dude. And he's like, send me the joke. So I had to screen record. Like, I don't have a special, like a video special. It's an album. So I screen recorded from my album, the whole track. And luckily, like, I have that in, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, I've just done it. I have it in a
Right.
physical form, like an album, like something legitimate you can go to. And that was recorded. Like, I mean, I've had that joke for years. It's like, that's an old one. I just am not turning out a special every year like
Sure.
someone like Mark is. It's like I was always working a full-time job and, other excuses. So I recorded the joke, sent it to him. And obviously, like, he has his version, and he was like, "Wow, it's pretty similar." I was like, "Look, I'm gonna need to talk about this on my podcast because it's just so many people have been bringing it up. Like, I can have you on it, and we can have your side as well, or I can just address it by myself. But I really would like you to be on it, so like we can talk about this. I think it's a good example of this sort of thing happening." And so he did know about it, leading into it, and so it's almost like the stuff we talked about before. Not like it was fluff, but like I had him on to talk about this joke that
Sure, it's
was
kind of a
very
big
similar.
deal. Like,
Yeah, it
it's
was a big
so
deal.
similar, and each of the
Yeah.
punches is almost like the exact same way. Like you said, you both set up the premise the same way, and they're really some of the exact same punchlines.
Yeah.
Like the
So,
athlete line is identical, and it's just
yeah.
like, wow.
Uh so and I really was like, Mark he's a busy guy. He's not going to like he wasn't sitting during my set writing down every bit, but it's like he heard it. It got into his head and then probably like a nugget, and then a couple years later thought of it and was like, oh yeah, he had those lines like ready to go because they were maybe logged back in his brain. But I don't think he's somebody, again, he writes so much. He's not somebody that I think would need to like steal one of my jokes, someone who opened for him years ago, and then do it years later. So there is the part of me that like the knee-jerk reaction, like, that's my fucking joke. We worked with each other.
Right,
What the
sure.
fuck? And then
Yeah.
I'm like, think about it, Chrissy. Like, you're not the fucking center of anybody's universe. Like, he's very busy. This could be a same brain thing, but it's very fucking similar. And so he kind of sort of ish admitted that it was pretty darn close and apologized. And and it's tricky because it's like, I want to talk about this and even clip it in a way so that people can see what we're talking about. But I didn't want to make it like Mark Norman steals my bit. Like, I
Right.
didn't want it to be like, here we had this nice conversation, but then after the fact, maybe there's a clip out or something where it looks like I'm just being like, fuck you, he took my joke. Like, I really was trying to be understanding about it and not do like a gotcha situation.
Sure. And I think like you guys are both legit. I mean, I don't know how to express this, but you're both very authentic comedians. Like, I don't really get the impression from either one of you that you're like, I really feel like when I'm hearing you guys speak, I'm getting who you really are. So the idea that he would be the type of guy who would like knowingly steal something from someone that's also like respected, that just doesn't sound like what I know of the guy. So I think
Yeah.
your approach was the healthiest and most productive, and also a good example of how sometimes things happen like that, like wires cross. Either you thought of something or you came up with something together. I think Patrice and Bill Burr both had a similar bit around the same time about the Sarah McLachlan commercials about the pets, and they both had like a similar angle on it. Like it was like the
Okay,
shelters,
wow.
yeah. And it was because it was probably they just probably hanging out making that joke, and then they both just recorded it on stage, and it's just
Right.
happens.
Similar. You have a similar sense of humor. You see the world in a similar way, in a similar, whether it's the darkness in it or the observations you make. And then your brain like gets trained over time just through who you're hanging out with and how you see the world. Like, yeah, you're going to make maybe the same comparisons and make the same patterns.
And
But
if
yeah,
you're
that was,
writing comedy all the time, you just are looking for funny ideas, funny premises, and then you're like, oh, that's funny. Oh, that's a really funny concept. I can build on this, and you don't even realize it wasn't your idea.
Yeah, that was crazy though, and he handled it like he could have been an asshole, and he really wasn't. He could have just like not done the show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I really didn't want to like take advantage of the opportunity of having him on because it was like he was somebody I wanted on my show for a long time, but I'd asked him a bunch. He never got back to me. Like he's busy, Chrissy. Like just find just find other people. So it was kind of like a win-win.
Yeah, no, I thought you guys it was a great show, and I really appreciated you putting that out there. So,
Oh,
way to
thanks.
go! Yeah, 100%. I was watching another clip of yours, which was a lot different, but also equally interesting. I was watching your a clip that you put out of Owen Benjamin. What are your? I don't really know much about Owen Benjamin. I know of him like as like a myth. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Just like a, I hear whispers of this guy. I think that was the first time I'd ever really listened to the guy speak, and it was all about like his flat Earth perspective and his flat Earth opinion, which was, I got to tell you, he does make a pretty decent argument. You know, there's like some things I was
Yeah,
saying.
I think it's fun to think about that it's possible.
Yeah, I have a
And I
friend who's
think
very convinced of it.
it's very revealing, and also I think if someone is like gets very triggered and angry by the idea of flat Earth, it's like that shows a lot about them, like how they deal when things are out of their control, and like
Mm-hmm.
they have a paradigm shift, and or just like, oh, the world is not what you thought, and it's like we still have to all get up and go to work, even if the Earth is flat. You know what I mean? Like you're still gonna take your flights, and you're still gonna like everything is kind of the same, but it's fun to think about why systems are put in place and who benefits from what lie or what system.
Do you count Owen as like a friend, or is it just someone that you interviewed?
I think I wouldn't say like no, he's not somebody I would call if I was like having a bad day. But I think we're cool. Like I would say that we're like cordial. He's somebody like I like to have on the show every once in a while. We've never met or anything, but I think I was attracted to having him on at first because I'm like, I like the idea of talking to people that are like canceled and shunned by
Mm-hmm.
like the mainstream for whatever. So getting into like, okay, why were you canceled? Why are you misunderstood? I like sort of clearing the air on people that are very misunderstood, like someone like him or Gavin McInnes or Anthony Cumia, so people can see like a fresh kind of example of who they are instead of like, oh, I heard years ago,
Mm-hmm.
this is the thing, so that's who you are forever. There's something nice about bringing these people back into the fold to hear from them, to see where they're at now, and
Well,
so
it's
people can be like,
gotten.
oh, he's not that crazy after all, or oh, what's the big deal?
Well, he was. I mean, I like I said, I genuinely found myself like thinking about it, and I was like, "Huh, really? That's true. There's no flights over Antarctica ever. You're just like, is that a
Yeah,
fact? I'm just like wondering. I'm just like thinking about it because like I have a friend of mine who is pretty hardcore in that direction, and I don't personally believe it, but like if you were gonna ask me how to prove it, I'd be like, I don't really know if I'm qualified. I just sounded good, it sounded right when I learned it. I don't really know for sure, so I guess I just trust it sort of
I
relatively
think people get
blindly.
upset because it's like a FOMO thing. Same thing with like Hollow Earth. Like, oh shoot, like there's a whole other world out there or countries out there, or like right the idea that there are countries outside of the like with the flat Earth theory is like there's this crust or the firmament or whatever, and then there are countries like land masses outside of Antarctica which rims the whole thing.
Oh,
So it's
really?
almost
That's
like
the theory? I didn't.
that's another theory. I don't know if that's like
Okay.
with flat Earth, but it's like this that's where all the elites and like government people
Oh, really?
go. Like they'll go to countries that we don't even know about, like
Whoa.
continents basically
Oh
outside of
man.
the Antarctic rim or whatever.
That
So
sounds like the plot of like a dope like novel or video game or movie or something like. That's just
yeah.
very creative. I think a lot of these conspiracy guys, like I said, I don't really know what to believe. I personally believe that we live on a globe and it spins, but like I said, I couldn't prove it. But a lot of these guys are so creative. You're like, maybe you should like write a book, or write
Yeah.
a
Do
novel.
something kind of constructive with it for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
But then again, if it's really the truth, then they should be trying to convince people that it's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
I get in the weeds on this one. I get a little.
It's fun to like think about smaller ones, like smaller scale conspiracy theories, like the moon landing was faked. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's more easier to chew and
Mm-hmm.
swallow than like the whole earth. Oh shit.
Yeah. And the Moon one I do find pretty compelling, also because like they always said it was Kubrick involved, and then he had like the 2001, but then he would drop these weird little hints in his movies where you're like, shit, did Kubrick fake the moon landing? Like there's enough things to point to. It's like when
Hmm.
Danny's got like the Apollo like 13 or whatever Apollo 11 sweater in the Shining movie. You're like, why did he pick that one? You
Oh,
know, it's such a
interesting.
yeah, it was such a unique. You're just like that, you're Kubrick. I know every single decision you make is meticulous. So why that one? So it really does make you ask questions. And it's
Yeah,
but
it's
like
fun.
once
It's fun to
again,
think about.
it is fun to think about. I couldn't prove it one way or the other. So I'm gonna be straight down the middle on that one because I just don't know. I just genuinely don't know. But yeah, no, I did find that was super interesting, and I like that. I like the idea. There was a guy that Ryan Long had on his podcast called John Christ or John Christ. Do you know him?
Oh, I've heard of him.
Yeah, I'd never heard of him, but I guess he was canceled way early on.
Oh, wow.
He was almost like Anthony Cumia, like proto canceled, you know?
Ooh,
Yeah, I
is he a
didn't know.
comedian?
He is a comedian. He's very funny too. I guess he's Christian, which doesn't normally align with comedy, but he is quite funny. Like I've watched a lot of his stuff since, and he was really funny on the show. And he's very like he has a really blunt way of communicating that you wouldn't expect from someone who like outwardly identifies as like a Christian. But it was really he's a really interesting guy, and I was like, oh, is someone canceled I didn't even know about.
Did they talk about what he was canceled for?
Yeah, it was just stupid speech shit. You
Okay.
know, it's just the same as everyone else for the most part. You know, everyone who didn't commit a crime. You know,
Yeah.
it's just someone who's like said something you're not supposed to say when you weren't supposed to say it. But I guess he was super low. He was like suicidal about it and all that.
Oh, wow.
Well, you kind of had like a bit of a cancelization for a little while, right? Like I don't know
For
if like
sure.
yeah.
Like a lot of hard years. Like I feel like my well, okay, well, specifically canceling in the sort of comedy world. Yeah, it was 2018 when I first started going on Compound Media after my mom died, and then I did an impression of this like woke comic girl, and then she basically mobilized a whole community of comics to come after me, I guess, because she had convinced them that I was encouraging people to like go after her, and it was really just an insane misunderstanding. And I've talked about this on like other podcasts, but basically, like you know, when we were chatting, she was like, "You don't understand, Chrissy. Like, people are saying this one guy said I should be raped with a railroad spike," and I was like, "Kate, where would someone even get a railroad spike in 2018?" And I think because I didn't appropriately empathize with her victimhood,
Mm-hmm.
she didn't like that, and she kind of like turned me into an enemy, and then but this is all in hindsight. So after that railroad spike conversation, I went back on Compound on In Hot Water, wrapped up in like this tinfoil costume, being like, I'm
Uh,
Spike. I'm the anti-raping railroad Spike. Like, I don't want to be up in any human keister. I have a spike. I have 6 little spikes at home that I care about very much, and a rail. Like, I'm not interested in any kind of interspecial. So I was being this goofy personified railroad spike thing, but since it was behind a paywall, Kate and all of her underlings, I guess, and the people that are trying to suck up to her to eventually, I don't know, get something from her, take screenshots. Someone takes screenshots. Oh, look, this is Chrissy being the railroad spike, and that was turned into look at Chrissy's being this raping railroad spike. Look how horrible
wow.
she is. She's such a horrible person,
Hmm.
encouraging people to send her death threats. Meanwhile, she was like not
Uh,
able to produce a single actual death threat. But this was coming off like the Me Too era, so she was fully taking advantage of that. And since she had better credits than me at the time, a lot of comedians kind of just like took to her side.
mm-hmm.
And since I'm on Compound Media, like, ugh, I'm already
Mm.
perceived as sort of like alt right and scary, I guess. Which is funny because like not too long before then, I was like hosting a show every month at the Stonewall Inn that a lot of these like liberal comics were like trying to get on. So it takes very little for the sort of like community perception to flip. And that's when I kind of realized like, oh wow, okay, it's all about how things look, and like the virtue signaling, and like doing the right thing, I guess, which I was never doing because I just wanted to explore my own sense of humor and be with the people that I thought were funny. And
Well,
that
that
was
is
like,
funny.
yeah.
But that's funny because the response is like, "Oh, okay, she didn't think I was empathetic enough, so I'm just gonna make a joke and go
Yeah.
so far in the other direction," which still isn't good enough for her. Is she still a comedian? Does she still work? This
I
person?
think so. I think so. She's gained like 100 pounds since then. I
Well,
think
that
she's
sounds
still
funny.
working. Yeah, maybe she's
That's
not well, but
maybe not, because he doesn't. I
yeah.
mean, I don't know her. I've never seen her. I have no idea. But I just that just doesn't sound funny, like a funny person. That sounds like someone who kind of wants to have a cause.
Oh yeah, and her boyfriend died of a drug overdose, and then she totally made it about her.
Well, yeah.
I think she even like wrote a book about it or partially. So it's like, okay, this is a person who's like taking advantage of the things that are happening around them.
Yeah, that's pretty gross. It's pretty lame. It's very much like I live in Austin, Texas now. I've lived in LA and New York. I've always been in like progressive cities, and I'm just now gaining some skills on how to navigate these people and stop like stepping on my own dick.
Wow, it's that big.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't like to brag, but it's just like
I've never
it's
heard
just
anybody say that
you never
phrase.
heard
It's
that
funny.
expression?
No.
Step on your own dick. No, it's I think it's a kind of just a put your foot in your mouth or just shoot yourself in the foot kind of thing. But just meaning like they're out there and they are there's a lot of people that are just looking to get angry or looking to use you as some sort of lightning rod to make themselves look moral or just or something like that. And I think part of like living in these cities, I guess as a comic it's a little different because you have like an act, but for me it's like a little bit more like, oh, I just have to, I don't know, learn how to navigate and deal with these people in a more not constructive but like strategic way, because they're out there and what they want to do is like use you to, I don't know, make some
Yeah.
point.
That's what I learned. Like people will purposely misunderstand you if it furthers their cause.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, "Oh, wow, okay."
Yeah,
That's just
I
part
did.
of growing older. You learn like who your core group of people are, like who is your crew, and you learn to kind of like protect yourself a little better.
Yes. Yeah. Precisely. Like that's exactly what I'm suddenly learning how to do, which I'm happy because it's a useful skill. And also, it does allow you to get to know some people who are like cooler. Like, for instance, I was talking with this girl at a bar the other day, and she was friends with the bartender. And I just got the impression that they were kind of like a little woke duo, which is fine, be woke, whatever. But that also means I'm playing it really close to the chest during this
Yeah.
conversation. And so I was talking with this girl, the Packers were playing, and she was saying how she didn't like Aaron Rodgers. And I just assumed it was because he went on Rogan and talked shit about the vax. That's
Mhm.
what I just assumed. It's Austin. But as I got to know her, look, she actually had some pretty funny reasons. She's like, I don't know, his helmet's so bulbous. Why is it so big? And I was like, oh, okay. And then she just said some of the things that he said, and I was like, oh, here it comes. And then it didn't. And I was like, okay, I'm actually
Oh.
talking with a real human being. This is great. But like me giving it that space and just trying to fill them out without ever asserting anything of my own gave me the insight to this person. So it works in both
That's
ways.
good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's so quick to judge. It's easy to judge. Like when I was in Austin for that show, I was like, this audience is going to be uptight and liberal, and like, are they even going to like me? I'm like pre-defensive, and the crowd was awesome, and
Mm.
the show went really well. I'm like, oh, this is great, And so, yeah, you have to watch. Like, it's so easy to prejudge a city, a type of person. And same thing when I was in Philly, my opener was a girl with a shaved head and earrings and I think tattoos, but she had a shirt that said vaccine on it. And like she's featuring for me, and I'm like, oh God, like is this gonna be a mismatch? And then like I heard some of her set, but not listening too closely because I was getting ready to go up. And then I got on stage, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that girl Sarah was here to open for me. I thought she was here to protest the show. Like she looks like every girl I fight with on Twitter. Like I really can't believe that she was, she's cool with it. And then I stay after the show. I talk with her. Turns out she's fucking up. She's pure blood as well and based as fuck and had actually
Wow.
asked to specifically open for me.
No
She was like kind
way.
of a fan and she's like, "Oh, Vaccine? That's just a band." And I was like, "Oh my
Oh,
God." I was like, "You
wow.
are so not what I thought you were." And it felt really cool
That is
to like,
cool.
I mean, of course you can't help but judge people.
Of
It's like
course.
it's reflexive, but it felt good to like stay and hang out with her and the other host. I was like, you know what? I'll stay and hang with them instead of like if I had went with my judgment and just like went back to my hotel, I wouldn't have had this. And now I have this like nice connection with these guys. And I'm like, if you're ever in New York, like I thought they were great and it was a fun hang.
That's so cool.
And I think most headliners they just like get the fuck out of there, or they, at least the ones that are like older and more famous than me,
Sure.
they just scram. And I don't know, I kind of like to hang out because I was like, I like the vibe. Same thing. I had judged Philly. I was like, oh, it's gonna be so dangerous. Am I even gonna be okay? But it's like I'm in New York every week, which people also think is retardedly dangerous. And I like the street that the Philly Helium was on. I liked the feeling of it, and it was cool to hang with these local comics. And I was happy that I didn't judge her for having a shaved head. So she's like, I'm not fucking vaccinated. I was like, what?
Nice. Dude, that's rad. That's so funny. That reminds me of something that happened to me in Austin here. So I was hanging out with a bunch of girls at a bar that I had just met, but one of them I was hitting it off really well with, and lots of connection and physical, like the indicators that this is going well. And
she was unbuttoning her shirt, and you're like, I think this is going well.
I think we're headed somewhere. Yeah. But so then the girls started talking, and me and the other dude were just kind of having a chat, and they were talking about how bad dating is in Austin. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of curious, like how, what are the things? And then the girls were talking, well, you either have to like sacrifice looks or like whatever, how their brain works or what they think. And I was like, okay.
Functioning brain.
I was like, I understand that,
He's hot, but retarded.
And I was like, I totally identify with this problem. I've had the same issue. And, but then they started really what the truth of the matter was. It was the politics really is the issue, is that they're like, oh, I won't date these hot conservative guys. And
oh man, they're missing out. And that's what they fucking actually want. Like deep down, a girl thinks she wants, but it's like, no, you need a guy to kind of like check you a little bit.
There needs to be some balance, right? Yeah. You don't want, men aren't women, and you don't want that. But the one girl was saying like, oh yeah, if he says moderately conservative on his Tinder profile, you got to watch out because that means fully conservative. And then the girl that I was like hitting it off with she was talking about how now, but mind you, the girl that I've been hitting it off with and the other girl, they both had said respectively that they'd been single for 5 and 7 years.
Oh, okay. That's a lot.
It's a lot. If you won't make one sacrifice for other people's values and you're like, no, I'm going to stay single forever if it means I don't have to date someone who thinks Trump's not that bad, and then she said that she went on this date. And then she was like so upset at the end because she learned, oh, he's a Trump supporter, he's anti-vax, and then he supports Joe Rogan. She was just like repulsed.
Supports Joe Rogan? He's not running for office. What's there to support? You listen or you don't. Yeah.
I don't know. And I was also just like, you're gonna exclude anyone who listens to the biggest podcaster on the planet? Like, it's a mostly guy audience. He gets like 200 billion downloads a year. Do you know how many people you're excluding from potentially dating? It's like all of them.
You're telling me you can't find one Rogan episode that you thought was okay? Like, that's just, you're not even giving it a try then.
It was wild. It was such a wild standard to uphold. And so once I overheard her say that, I was just, after a little while, I was just like, oh, I got to get going. I got things to do. Just like, all right, this is fucking stupid. I'm all 3 of those things. She's never going to, like, where's this going to go? But then, so I was like, well, that was crazy. But then a few weeks later, I asked this other girl at another bar, I'm like, could you ever date someone who like listens to Joe Rogan? She's just like, I don't think so. He's been spreading all this dangerous misinformation.
The fucking, the media took a hold of her brain.
But it was like 2 people in 2 totally different situations. I'm like, this is a thing. I was thinking about doing like a man on the street interview and just finding out how many women in Austin won't date guys who like Joe Rogan.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I know. It's like pretty crazy, right? I was just
that's disheartening. Like, that sucks. It sucks to be a single dude right now.
Yeah, it definitely does. But especially with such insane standards like that. It's just like, all right, if you don't want a Trump guy, vote for Trump. All right, whatever. I mean, okay, the vax thing you can kind of go back and forth on, but likes Joe Rogan? Like, are you serious? What a sin. My God. Yeah.
Wow, that sucks.
That's pretty fucking funny.
That's like, I think women are easier to psyop. I think they're more, because we have a people-pleasing gene in us, and I think it cuts off our free thinking sometimes. Like our
I
we don't want to stand out. I think it has to do something like biologically in you because you're more vulnerable. So it's like we are more inclined to like be with a group. That's where the whole like going to the bathroom in a group came from. I think it's like it's something biological in women that the government like fucking knows about and fully takes advantage of, and the media fully takes advantage of because women are easier to trick and lead astray.
I agree. I mean, I think if you take that the kind of the origins of this new ideology that's taken hold, this sort of mind virus as it's been referred to, it started with feminism. I mean, that was like where it first took root, and then just kind of morphed into this monstrosity that we have today. That's just kind of like turned people into like,
And now people are
uh,
growing dicks on their arms.
yeah, exactly. Things are out of hand. I did have a question for you about because I've always been like comedy adjacent. Like I was an actor for a really long time, and I've done like a few open mics, but I don't consider myself like a comedian. But I've always been a huge fan, and I would
Do
hear,
you think you think you're funny?
yeah, I
Okay. So
do. I mean, it's
you
a
could
weird
get
thing
back
to.
into it. Do you want to get back into it?
I do. Yeah, I absolutely
Okay.
do. Yeah, I have like jokes written down and concepts and stuff like that. And but the question was more about like I used to hear so much about women in comedy and how dangerous comedy is for women and all these things. And I was just curious, like, what your insight or opinion is on that whole topic.
I imagine the only place where it's dangerous for women in comedy would be like in the Middle East without a fucking burqa or whatever you're supposed to wear when you're out there. Like I don't it's not anymore. It's not anymore. It might be I think life is dangerous for men and women in different ways. So to say like that just applies to comedy is a fucking cop out, I think, for not working as hard. It's just like I think women who are prone to do like to go to like a victim status thing, they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not getting enough opportunities." And instead of saying, "Fuck, am I not working hard enough? Do I need to change up what I'm doing?" They'll say, "Oh, it's just hard to be a woman." Because that way no one can help you and you can't change anything about yourself. So you're now resigned to your circumstances. And I think that's a cop out. I think it's hard for men in comedy as well, especially if you're like a white guy. Then people go, "Oh, you're dime a dozen." Like Tyler Fisher, his agent straight up told him, "There's nothing for white guys right now. Sorry." My co-host on my Compound Media show, this guy Andrew Harms, he was fucking mugged on the way to do the show.
Wow.
Still did the show with like his nose bleeding and no
Wow.
wallet. I'm like,
Wow.
yeah, that you could say it's hard to be, but men can't say it. A man can't say, "Oh, it's hard. It's hard to live in New York City, or it's hard to be a man in comedy, or like it's hard just living uh right now." So, and I think that's taking advantage too, because like a man's kind of I think the Me Too movement takes advantage of a man's kind of you want to protect, I guess, and like I
Mm.
think women instinctually know that, and it's just taking advantage. It's like I had this joke that this is part of my early like I guess cancellation from like the mainstream I guess like New York City comedy scene because there was this like they were like left and right these girls were like claiming, "Oh, I got raped." This was again during like Me Too. These like mostly open mic level girl comics be like, "Oh, so and so raped me in the basement of this club and so and so this." And I'm like, I just what did I say? I said oh man, it was something about and it was such a it was a line that people repeated for years. Oh, that's what I said. If you have time to get raped, you're not doing enough spots. And lost their fucking mind over this. And I was like, "No, no, no, I'm not this is not me victim blaming. This is not me." I'm like, literally, I look at myself like I have never been raped because I am too fucking busy. Because I'm trying to get better. I'm not lingering late night in a basement drunk with the wrong people. You know what I mean? Like, don't put yourself in that situation and it's not going to happen to you. And some women are so fucking dumb. They just like they live their lives irresponsibly. And then they're like, "No, it's not because you were out late drunk till 2 a.m. in front of a bunch of horny dudes wearing a skirt hanging out after a show." It's like, no, that has nothing to do with like being a woman in comedy. It says you were dumb and made bad choices and you didn't look after yourself. So I'm like, if you were out doing spots all night, guess what you wouldn't have time to do? Get raped. And everybody lost their minds over that. For years, people would keep saying that. That was like my
That
catchphrase.
is so funny. Also, I bet very poorly received. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially from a.
It got me kicked out of the like New York City lady Facebook group, comedy Facebook group for sure.
Mhm. It's a
So
fucking great line. That's so funny. Well, I mean, there's something authentic about that though. Like it's if you're like in the wrong neighborhood and you get robbed, like isn't that kind of maybe shouldn't you have been looking over your shoulder? Or, like what are you doing there late at night? Like there's kind of like just anyone's personal
yeah.
accountability for putting themselves in dangerous situations. It's like obviously not defending the terrible act, but it's just kind of like yeah. Sometimes I mean I don't know. It's a little tougher for me to comment on, but there is something to the like you're putting yourself in dangerous situations. That's a little bit on you,
Yeah.
but that is interesting, but I mean, it's not an uncommon narrative. Like Bonnie McFarlane made that whole documentary about it, the "Women Aren't Funny" documentary, and she's very funny. I've always thought her to be a
Yeah.
good comedy, but a good comedian. But I've heard her say certain things just about women in comedy and how it's difficult. I mean, that was even though it was mostly a joke, that was still kind of the thesis of that documentary is that like it's tougher and yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
for sure. And I just saw Jessica Kirsten, who is arguably the funniest female
She
comic.
is
Like that
a
is like I
genius.
say that without hesitation. She's so fucking good.
Hmm.
She just was turned down by Netflix for a special. So it's like things are changing and like I don't see her. I mean, she did tweet about like, well, what the fuck kind of, but she wasn't like, "Oh, it's so hard being a woman in comedy," because she knows she's talented. And I think just the comedy landscape is sort of changing. And well, Bonnie's married to another comic, Rich Voss. So who
Rich.
knows? Maybe from her perspective, she sees them as equally talented, and maybe she sees. But everyone is different. That's the thing is like you can't really compare yourself to uh like male comics. Like it's just the opportunities are different,
Hmm.
and the opportunities that you make for yourself. There's so much going on. Like it's like I don't know. I imagine dentists have the same, problems, right? Like, oh, it's so hard to be a female dentist. I'm not respected in my area of expertise. I face sexism. It's like, I don't know, maybe you were fucking sounding like a bimbo one day.
Well, I think
I
a
just
lot of
find that it's such a
times
cop out. I feel like
I
that's an
agree.
excuse.
I often see like I'm not a woman in comedy, so I can't say for sure. But a lot of times when people say that, they'll just be like, "Well, look at the top." 20 earning comedians, like 19 of them are guys. So, therefore, we have a sexism problem in comedy. It's like, but you're also not acknowledging that the majority of open micers, the majority of all these guys getting no acknowledgement, getting no deals are also guys. Like,
More
the only,
comedians are guys. Probably like I don't know, 60% or more of comedians are men. So it's just
it's like
like I don't know.
you don't count all those guys who get absolutely nothing when you're
Right.
assessing how unfair the landscape is. And it's like the same thing kind of and not even just in comedy, just in general. It's just like, oh, we want more women this, more women that. It's like the majority of men don't have like a lot of power in their lives or like money or capital. They
Yeah.
work at gas stations and shit like that. It's like you never really factor them in when you're talking about how unequal
Yeah.
things are
You could
for
argue
for
that
men
it's
and women.
that it's easier to be a woman in comedy because when you're starting out, just about every produced show has to have like their token woman. And so if you're even kind of a funny chick, especially if you're good looking at all, it's easy for you to get those first couple of spots. And like you can kind of take advantage of the fact that like if a guy is into you, he could probably book you on his show. And like you can be smart and like you have different tools in your belt that you can use to help further yourself. And it's like your looks will only take you so far. Then you actually have to eventually write good jokes, but they can help get you a leg up and get you on those first couple of shows where a better like a more talented guy who's maybe a little like doesn't stand out as much, he's not the right skin color, he's just a boring old white guy, like he may not get those initial first couple of spots that a woman would. So
Hmm. Speaking of boring old white guys, but the guy who at your show in Austin, who was like not the feature, but the one right before him, I don't know what
okay, the
that's
host.
referred. Not the host, because there was like the host, and then there was another dude who like
Okay, that's the feature.
that's the feature, and then what's
Well,
the
it
girl?
depends. It depends. Like if it's three people in a show, there's a host, feature, and headliner. So like I
Yeah.
guess technically I had two openers. So I
Hmm.
had Lila and that other guy. Maybe his name was Andrew.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
remember his name, but he was. I really liked his set. I thought he
Okay,
was very
cool.
funny. Yeah, he had some good jokes that I like. One that I've been repeating. I don't want to burn it for him, but it was just. I was just like, wow, that was good. And he's like a local comic, local Austin comic. I was like, oh, that's really funny. I was like, I really
Oh,
enjoyed
I
that.
wish I could remember what his last name was. I'll have to look
Yeah,
back.
I don't know. a comic friend of mine here knew it like immediately when I described it.
Okay.
I was like, whoa, that's weird. Like, how the hell did you know that so quickly?
He
But
knew what
yeah,
comic it was based on you doing his joke?
she did. She knew just
Oh,
about
cool.
a very loose description. I was like, yeah, he's like kind of tall, skinny white guy, wears glasses, and she goes, whatever his name was. I was like, Google. I was like, that's him. Like, holy shit, how did you do that?
Oh,
It
wow.
was like a magician. I was like, that was
That's cool.
impressive.
She's
Yeah, it
probably
was
a
pretty
comedy
cool.
fan. Yeah.
Yes, she actually very much is a like she's young too. She's like 23, but
Oh,
really
that's
knows her
awesome.
shit. Yeah, knows her stuff for sure. Yes, yes. I have a question for you. From Steph. You know Steph, my nerdy home that was hanging out with
Oh,
us.
yeah. I love
Yeah.
Steph.
I was like, "Do you want me to ask her anything?" And she said, "Yeah, well, they're just girly questions." But she says, "I'm just curious how your wedding planning is going. Have
Oh.
have you thought of a theme, or are you going to elope?"
Okay, so we have thought about, right, do we want to, I think I definitely want to do it in a church because I feel like I want to be like, I want to make God happy. So, and that feels like the right thing to do.
Make up for all
And
the other
make
all
up for all the
decisions.
years of
Yeah.
indiscriminate dick sucking. Yeah, that's how I'm gonna get back in his good graces.
Yeah.
Um,
Wink.
we're waiting until his brother's wedding is done, and that's next month. And then, Content House is at the end of October, so we're
Oh
probably really gonna
yeah.
start looking after that. I have like started doing like little Pinterest boards. Like I'm just looking at like hairstyles and like dress styles. And but I also want to be smart about it and see if I can like do a lot of this stuff without going totally broke. Like I think it would be cool to get like a cool discount dress that's like and not have to spend like 2 or 3 grand on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think the color scheme is going to depend on like what time of year it is. Like a spring wedding, probably different colors than a summer wedding. So
Yeah,
I
this
think
is
once we
definitely
have
a question that like
this
Steph
is a
would be
chick,
able to.
this
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
chick question for sure. I can already see you checking out.
I'm
So
just like I don't really have any thoughts or opinions on this. Like, I used to do a lot of wedding bartending, and I was like, maybe I can
you
weigh in on
seem like
that.
a wedding bartender.
I was, and some insight that I got that was like a little unsettling.
Who gets the drunkest at weddings usually?
It'll always be some like random relative, like for the most part, it would just be some guy where you're just like, Jesus, buddy, get it together. But there was a thing that I clocked quite a bit was there was a lot of very sexual energy coming off the bride, usually on the days of their weddings.
Towards
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah. I would get that not every time, but like it would, or there'd be like intentionally like avoiding interacting, or there would just you'd get like a real like aggressive sexual vibe off the bride.
Wow.
And I've heard of stories. I heard a story about a guy who found out years after they'd been married that his wife had sex with the bartender at their whatever event
No.
in the bed that they eventually consummated the marriage in the next
Oh my
night.
God.
I know. And when I
And you're
heard
like,
that
and that guy
story,
was me.
and that guy was Matt from Foulball Productions. No, I when I heard that story, I was like 100%. 100%. Like I just got that real sexual vibe off a lot of brides. I
You
don't
know
know.
what it is? Because it's like you're in a I don't want to call it like a non-threatening position, but it's like you're not in the bridal party at all. You're not involved at all, but just,
No.
like you're in the room. And plus, like think about what goes into like your wedding day. I imagine like you're probably in the best shape you've been in a while. Your hair is done, everything's done. You're probably wearing like awesome underwear underneath. Who knows,
Mhm.
right? But you're feeling good, and it's
Mhm.
probably like you're probably a little drunk. So it's like, oh, any guy who's like even a little bit kind of hot, you're like, oh, hello.
I think that's part of it. I think it's also just as much as like guys getting cold feet. I think it's women getting really cold feet too, and just kind of a little bit of that panic of
Hmm.
like being stuck with the person forever, right? Like
Oh,
no new excitement, no like never gonna have that kind of new exciting night with a new guy and that feeling of electricity.
oh,
I think
okay.
that's part of it too. It's just kind of like a bit of a panic. But yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
that it not that uncommon. It was pretty interesting.
Wow. And then so you slipped him your card, and you're like, in case he goes on a business trip.
I never did sleep with any brides. I never did, but I slept with enough women from my days bartending weddings. It was easy. It was just, I mean, it's how I got laid for a while.
Wow. Same
Yeah.
thing, because you're dressed up, you
Hmm.
look good, You're like, it's a fun time. Everyone goes to a wedding wanting to have a good time.
Yep. And then they keep coming back to the bar. So I don't have to break the ice with conversation. We're already talking, you make a few jokes, ha ha ha. And then they're just like, you're cute. What are you doing after that? They're already loose.
It's like shooting fish in a barrel.
It
Jesus.
was just layups, layups, layups. Yeah. It was pretty great. It was pretty great.
So why'd you stop?
Well, I left LA,
Okay.
and it was like I just kind of moved on. It's also like events are kind of a tough way to make a living because they're very sporadic. And you
Okay.
don't like you'll do really well during wedding season, but then there's these droughts where you just don't have any gigs, and you're like, oh, fuck, I don't know what to do. So it was just too much stress to try to juggle that lifestyle after a
Okay.
while, and I'm getting old. I'm like approaching 40. I need a little bit of stability.
You
You know
don't
what I
look
mean?
it.
Thanks, but it's true. 37 this year, so yeah, just I don't know. You got to grow up a little bit sometimes, right?
Are you dating anybody right now?
I I'm not dating anybody. I was dating someone and then that kind of fizzled and I have a few girls I'm talking to.
Okay.
I have like a date set up for tomorrow with a girl that approached me actually, which was kind of cool. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, I would have approached her, but I stupidly didn't. I forgot the geography of like where I live, and she says she lived in Cedar Park, which I thought was like more by Dallas, and I was like, oh, well, I'm not gonna ask out someone who lives 3 miles away, but it's actually only like 25 minutes away. So,
Okay.
luckily, she asked me out, and so I don't know. I'm gonna meet up with her tomorrow,
Okay,
but
cool.
yeah, just bachelor, very much so at the moment.
Do you want to get married?
I think so. I think I do, but I also think like I mean, I guess yeah, I guess you could get married. Like I feel like I'm getting old. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm approaching an age where it's kind of like, yeah, that might have already passed me by.
No, you're a man. You could actually, Matt, dick around like 10 more years before
10
you
more
could.
years.
Yes, and still have kids, probably that aren't retarded. Like you have time.
Well, that's comforting to know. Yeah, I that's good to know because I just started thinking about it. I'm just like, what if I have kids now? I mean, I'm gonna be like 60 and he'll be 20 or whatever. It's just
It's funny, the figuring out if you want kids or not is a really good catalyst for like the marriage thing because I think like with our generation, like I don't know, like nobody was really asking me. Like I don't know, it's having kids didn't seem important, and then I was like very much had a feminist phase in college, so then I kind of moved away from it even more. But like it just took me time to like figure out what I really wanted, and now it's like, oh yeah, maybe if I could squeak one out, that would be cool.
squeak one out. Is that the goal?
Yeah.
Are you like
I think so.
yeah?
Yeah. I think so. But same thing. Like, I don't want to be too old and I don't want it to like be all fucked up either. But
Right. Yeah. I don't want to destroy the kid from the jump.
people keep telling me, like, don't worry about it. Like, look at so and so. They had a kid at 40 something. So it's like, all right.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Yeah.
Segura had his kids pretty late in life, right? And
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, I think he's got like two kids that are like under 5, and he's I don't know, 45, something like that.
Okay.
So yeah,
That seems fine.
yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's a millionaire, but still, you know what I mean? Like, the
It's so
logistics work.
tricky because, like, biology and, like, olden times, you'd be having kids right in your 20s. But, like, that's when you're at your most broke and confused and
Mm-hmm.
you're like horny and fucking around the most and you're not in a place to think like who do I want as a life partner, and it's like,
Right.
and by the time you're making enough money where you're like, yeah, I think I can handle this, you're starting to approach like, oh god, especially for women, you're like, oh fuck, am I getting too old now? Like this really
Mm-hmm.
sucks. And I don't know, I'm just lucky that I found somebody good at all because like a woman pursuing stand-up comedy, I think when the conversation of it's hard being a woman, I think it has to do with the work-life balance because like I started stand-up at 26. So I sunk all my best dating and having kids years into stand-up pretty
Mm-hmm.
much.
Yeah.
So it's a big scary commitment, and like if I had been like where I'm at right now with having kids like 10 years ago, I probably not wouldn't have gone for it because it's like it's all your time to go out and date. It's like all your prime dinner date hours are spent at Mike's, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like you better love it, and if you don't, like you're not going to make it. And I
Yeah.
think the women that do sink all this time and commitment into it and they're like, fuck, I'm not where I would have liked to be. I mean, men have that feeling too, like, wow, I sunk 10 15 years into this and I'm not a household name.
That's what I
But
did with acting. I mean, I sunk like 15 years into it and like barely made a dent. It was pretty disheartening. You know, it was one of those things where it's like you believe in it, but then I'm like, in Los Angeles, and eventually it just dawns on me. I'm like, oh, they're never gonna cast me. Like, I'm not the
which is
type.
crazy because
It's
you seem like you
crazy.
would be the type.
Yeah, but they just no. It's like you're not in vogue. It was exactly what your co-host heard. I mean, I heard that from so many different managers and agents, and
Wow.
they always word it strategically, but you know what that means. Like we're not looking for
And then
straight
you're
white men
like,
right now.
when are white men going to be in again? They can't tell you. Like, by the time they're in again, you're going to be like fucking even older. So it's like,
Well,
damn.
and you get it from both sides too, because like at the same time, like all these girls in Hollywood still act as if I have all these advantages and privileges and things
Oh,
like that.
wow.
It's like crazy. So you're just like, what are you guys talking about? Like I had a coach say like, well, don't want to say this, but all the white men get all the roles, and I'm just like, I don't get any roles. So
Yeah.
I mean, me personally, I've not benefited from this amazing system that you claim
Your
exists, but.
amazing privilege. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be awesome if I knew where to cash in. I would cash in today. Like, tell me where to do that. I do. What does your fiance do? Is that public?
It's not super public, but he does have still like a 9 to 5 regular job, but also helps me like with my podcast stuff and
Cool.
my business now. Yeah.
Is
And
he
I was
funny?
working. He's so funny.
Really?
Frank makes me laugh more. And I've dated a couple of real comedians. He could be a stand up if he really wanted to. Like, we both have the same like quickness, like comedy minds. Like, we'll sort of like, sometimes we'll like write a tweet together and I'll be like, all right, I'm going to send it out. He's
That's
so
great.
good on podcasts. He's so sharp. He's so funny. He legit makes me like laugh the hardest of anybody. Uh, and I think I found when I was dating stand-ups, like there was always this a little bit unspoken like competition. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
always an underlying. I didn't like it.
Yeah. What do they say?
Yeah.
That it's only like a house is only big enough for one headshot or something like
Oh
that.
my God, really? Ha, that's
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
funny.
I know. And I was every time I dated an actress, I was like, oh my, that is so spot on. It's just too much of the same crazy or whatever it
You know what
is.
it is?
It's
It's like because you're trying to make a business out of yourself, and it just works so much better when you have somebody like two people working together on the same thing. Because it's like
mm,
you can't help someone with their business while you're trying to start your own. It's like you're just it's like it's an amazing blessing that like Frank does not want to be in the spotlight. He totally is talented enough where he could be, but that he wants to like help me like grow my shit is like really amazing.
did you
Yeah.
say he goes on podcasts?
Yeah, we've done God, when we first met, we started a podcast together like maybe a month or two into dating, which seems like such a
Wow.
huge commitment, and
That's crazy.
that was like in 2014, 15. And we did that together for like maybe a year or so, and then our third mic person ended up being such a pain in the ass, like we both
Mm.
ended up like bailing out of it. And so he's so good, and he'll sometimes would chime in on my show. But then we've done Frank Valbeiro's show. Quite frankly, he's like a big libertarian guy. Like, so we've both done his show together, and he's so great on that. He's so smart, and like he's like kind of classically libertarian. So we kind of like sometimes make a lot of the same points, but yeah, but not as often as I think. Like, I always check in with him. I'm like, do you have the bug to like do more stuff? And he's like, no, I'm good. I'm good.
That's
So
cool.
I think if I eventually get like move out or get my own like studio or like become like my business gets bigger and I can like maybe bring on more podcasts, like maybe there's a chance for him to do his own thing there, but I think he's cool with it right now.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, hey, if
Yeah.
he's like got that position where he's supporting you and he doesn't have that feeling of like I'm not honoring
Hmm.
this need to be an artist, then yeah, it's the best situation, really.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you before I let you go. I saw that you were hanging out with Cecil the other day, and I know that Cecil's identity is
We're like
secret.
buds.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I never would want to, besmirch or try to ask anyone's secret identity because my partner in culture crime fighting vigilante, he keeps his identity secret. But is Cecil a stand-up comic?
He's not, but I wouldn't be surprised if he moved towards that way. And I think he's going to be like less of a secret identity. I think he revealed his face kind of by accident the other day, but he was
Okay.
only, I think, doing that because he was going through like a really bad divorce. So
Oh,
I think he's going to be more open with his face these
because
days.
when I heard him on, I think it was FNT, like his speed and his
He's so
references,
funny.
I was like, this guy's got to be a
He did
comic.
he did my show on Compound on
Oh, okay.
Monday. So what, yesterday? And
It's
he's getting a
wild
lot faster. He's really funny.
with
And
the references
he
and
lives in Brooklyn. So and I'm in the city every week. I'm like, dude, you can come by whenever you want. We were hanging out with like Anthony Cumia at the bar last night. Like
cool.
we're just
That's
all
cool.
cracking each other up. Like it was a blast.
That's
So
rad. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I like that guy. I thought he was funny. But all right, that's interesting to know. I see. I had him pegged for like he's a stand-up and he's just like his online thing is separate. I don't know, but that yeah. All
I
right,
think
that's
he's somebody who could have, but like had a big job, like that, was like an entrepreneur in
hmm,
his 20s, made made his money and then married, had kids. So it's like that stuff takes up the time where you would be
yeah,
grinding it out at Mike's. It's almost like in my case, like your delayed development helps you a lot with stand up.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's maintain a juvenile sense of humor for a
Oh,
while.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, Chrissy, where can people find you?
Online, my YouTube channel, the Chrissie Mayr podcast. I try to bang out 4 new episodes a week. On Compound Media Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern. My show's called The Wet Spot. On Sundays is Simpcast. It's on my YouTube channel at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Hey, by the way,
Fridays,
sorry, I have a bone to pick with you. I saw the
okay.
Simcast the other day, and it said Anthony Cumia was on it, and then
He didn't
what?
come. Yeah, he
Yeah.
bailed, but he sent his girlfriend in his place. He sent
Ah,
Missy, and
okay.
he
I
felt
was
really
like
bad.
scrolling, scrolling,
I
scrolling. I never
know.
saw him.
I know. I'm gonna have to rebook him. Yeah,
Okay.
that was a bummer. I think he just was like not feeling up to it or whatever.
All right.
So he'll definitely come back on. And then Fridays, I'm on Nerdrotic's channel doing Friday Night Tights and then doing a bunch of shows. Thursday, I'll be at the Bridgeport Stress Factory. At the end of the month, I'll be in New Orleans. So September 30th and October 1st, I'll be at the Comedy House in New Orleans. And then the Orlando Improv Show is on October 27th.
Right on. Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this. This was great.
Thank you, Matt.
Right on. And thank you guys. You know the drill. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends. This is an easy one to share, okay? You're not just relying on me and my insight and jokes. This has got a professional stand-up comedian who we all love. So please do me a solid, share this one out, let people know about it, and see you all in the next one. Thank you so much.